The Doosan Moxy MT31 is an articulated dump truck that weighs 22 tonnes and has a top speed of 51 km per hour. The branded box has a nice photo of the factory in Norway, but there's no details or information about the real machine. Inside there are a couple of expanded polystyrene trays and are actually sealed together with some clear tape. So it's best to use a sharp modelling knife to cut the tape without damaging the trays too much. With the tape cut, you can take off the top piece and the model's covered with some polythene. The model can then be easily lifted out, and you can see that here on the review model there's a loose piece, and we'll look at that later. Looking underneath, the chassis is pretty good with the transmission modelled in metal, and the model number is marked as 501 because this casting is a number of years old. The rubber tyres are good, although perhaps just a bit too shiny, and the light clusters, handrails and mirror assemblies are all plastic. Some of the other cab details are excellent, with a mesh grille on the rear window and a really good instrument cluster on the inside. At the rear there is a painted stoplight and reversing light. Between the two rear wheels there's quite a large brass rivet which can be seen from certain angles, but the metal tipper body is good with a realistic looking chain for the tailgate mechanism. Underneath the body the chassis looks good with what looks like a hydraulic pump and a safety bar. Giving the MT31 a run out on the test track is a pleasure because it's a very smooth ride indeed. Each of the wheels rolls independently, and at the rear there's an interesting mechanism where the two rear wheels float, and that gives a good rough terrain capability. The steering is controlled by rams across the pivot point, and an angle of about 30 degrees can be obtained. There's also completely free rotational movement between the front axle and the trailer, so you can pose the results of poor driving if you want, and so the whole articulation mechanism is really smooth and works well, and if you pose the model steering it pushes along just fine. Tipping the body is easy and smooth, and the automatic opening tailgate works very well. The hydraulic rams are stiff enough that they will hold any pose, and the tipping angle is very good. There is another working feature, which is the safety bar, which is used to prop the body up when somebody needs to work underneath it to maintain the chassis or some of the transmission. On the model it easily folds up, and you can interlock it with a hole in the tipper body. So this allows a realistic alternative pose if you want to have people working on the chassis. There's one other feature, which is a feature on the review model at least, and that's the removable cover which goes on the front axle. It was loose in the box when the model was unpacked, and it seems to be a part which just plugs in. No glue has been used in the factory, and when you take the cover off, actually the transmission underneath is fully detailed, so possibly it is meant to be a feature that the cover is removable. The cover plugs back in, but it's a fairly loose fit, so it does tend to drop off easily. Here the CranesEtcTV team member is telling his mate that various bottom parts are exposed. Although this is quite an old model from NZG, it was first released in 2003 in Moxy Yellow, it's still pretty good with nice features and details. It looks good in Doosan colours and has enough going for it to be recommended.